I'm Russ Reed, and I'm in charge of SciTech. And SciTech is a lecture series we have at Forsyth Technical Community College. We have been doing this lecture series for 10 years. My partner in this series is Dr. Dwayne Davis from the chemistry department over at Math Science and Technologies Division at Forsyth Tech. And I just want to welcome today Dr. Laura Kavanaugh, who has come to us via our lab, our analytical laboratory down in Innovation Quarter in Winston-Salem in our downtown campus. And Laura, I want to welcome you to SciTech, and I want to thank Sean for recording this today. We've gone virtual because of COVID-19, and so we're in the midst of trying to make the best possible situation better. So we're just trying to improve what we do with respect to our students in trying to provide them great information from great people like yourself. So welcome to the series.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored, actually.
Laura, you have a most fascinating background, which I think our students, our staff, and our faculty would love to hear more about. So I would like to just start with a very simple question. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I grew up in Indiana, and when I was going to attend college, I decided to go to Purdue University. That's a public university in Indiana. And I was always very interested in kind of the space between engineering and science. I've always been very interested in science, but I also wanted to kind of have this practical application. So when I went to Purdue, they had a degree offering of chemistry and chemical engineering. And so it was kind of a really perfect match. I had a great science teacher in high school that really piqued my interest in chemistry and science. So I went and pursued a degree in chemistry and chemical engineering. And when I graduated with that degree, I decided I still wanted to explore more, and I decided to get a master's degree in mechanical engineering. And so I did that, and ended up getting a fabulous job after I graduated from Purdue at the Johnson Space Center, working in the Mission Control Center for the Space Shuttle. Did that for 13 years, worked over 40 space shuttle missions as a guidance, navigation, and control officer. And then after that, I decided to pursue another option because the space shuttle program was winding down and I needed to find a new outlet. And I was really drawn back to my interest in science. So I actually ended up going back to school at that time and got a PhD from Duke University and their university program in genetics and genomics. And after that, got a job in Research Triangle Park with the Biotech company, worked there for 11 years. And then recently, this year, a big surprise in my career came up. I actually ended up getting laid off. And so it was a shocking moment, but it was also an opportunity to create something new for myself. And so now I'm pursuing developing a new business in partnership with Forsyth Tech, which is what brings us to this conversation. And so that's a brief overview of a longer, a long story.
Laura, I want to take you back in time. To have accomplished all these academic degrees, I'm taking you back to maybe when you were in Indiana. Did you just naturally have a math gene, as we say? You know, how come you pursued science at the time? What was the driving force behind science and math for you? This is very important information for our students because sometimes there is just within society an opportunity for a lot of people to advance in science, but they don't because they don't think that they can do the math or the chemistry or whatever. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I am kind of one of those people who has a natural inclination for math and science, and I'm really drawn to it and I love it. But I I want to speak to people who may not have that, because I lack actually a lot of skills in literature and writing, and I really find it hard to write things. And so, everyone has got gifts and things that they feel good at and not so good at. But when I'm speaking to students, I think it's really important to understand you don't want to let your career be sidelined by just one class, like a math class, or by fear, or that you can't do it. Because when you're taking a class, there's so many people to support you. There's so many opportunities to get help. And I can tell you, professors and other students are all in the same boat. You should just kind of suck it up in a way. Like, you go take a class, you're not going to be doing that math for your whole career. So just get the help you need, take the time you need to get through a class, but never, I would hate for anybody to give up a career interest or anything because of a single class or fear of math. Because I found in my career, really the biggest important quality in success is persistence. It's not natural gifts. And if you're relying on your natural gifts, or if you ever get discouraged and think that's a signal you should stop, that's what I think sidelines most people when they don't need to be sidelined. So don't worry about things. You'll develop skills as you pursue things, get the help you need. And like I said, I've been good in some things in my career and not good in others. And those are the things where you need to help and use community to help you get through challenges.
Well, can you hear me, Laura? I just want to make sure I come back into the conversation because I muted myself. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes, I can.
Great, great. I was listening very attentively because these are key questions for us in this discussion today. Another thing that I've noticed is that people will pursue one area, but you are an excellent example of what I would call adaptability, and also sort of pursuing jobs that are, kind of like dream jobs for people. So your mission control job would be my second dream job. My first dream job would actually being in the space capsule. Can you just
Right, I agree.
can you talk to that a little bit? Because, as a young man, I always wanted to be, I come from Canada, but I always wanted to be Canada's first astronaut. And, I did silly things like build myself a space capsule, which I lived in for weekends. So
Nice.
my parents, thought that I might be a little loony, that's the word I use. And so how did you pull that off? I think it's just incredible. Did you just apply?
So I wish I could provide people with a recipe on how to do that. I stumbled my way into it, and I think it kind of speaks to continuing to focus on a certain thing that you want, and maybe you don't know the path there. And this will become clear as I go into the story, but I think just holding your mind focused on what you really want, you will eventually find your way there. And in my case, I was graduating from Purdue with my degree. I wanted to work in the space program. I've always kind of had my mind focused in that area, but I didn't know how to get there. I looked to apply to a lot of places, but at that time, the space program was not hiring very much, from anything I could tell. So I was interviewing with a lot of companies at Purdue, and one was coming to Purdue, Rockwell International, and they had a lot of they were in probably 500 different businesses and things they were doing. And at the time, Purdue did not have enough slots to interview all the people who wanted to interview with companies. So when I applied to interview with Rockwell, I didn't get the interview. Because I didn't win the lottery to get in. So what I did is after the interview day was over, I waited where I know they did the interviews, and I waited for the recruiter to come out. And I said, "Hi, I'm Laura Kavanaugh. I'm interested in talking to you, but I didn't get in the lottery. Could we schedule an interview?" And I thought he would schedule something for later to say I'm tired or whatever. But he said, "No, great, come on back. Let's talk right now." And I went back and talked with him, and he described a whole bunch of different jobs that they did at Rockwell. And then at the very end, he asked me if I had questions. And I said, "Well, what do you do at Rockwell?" And he said, oh, well, I don't do any of the things I talked about. I work in the Mission Control Center at the Johnson Space Center. I'm a flight controller for the space shuttle. And I said, that's the job I want. That's the job I want. So I'm sorry it wasn't like a direct path, because I can't advise students on how to get there. But I think, not giving up, giving things a try, keep exploring, keep pushing. And somehow things will come up for you.
So, Laura, I have to just ask you this quick question because it begs to be asked. Did you want to fly?
Oh, yes, I did. Actually, I applied. I kind of got through like the very, very first medical thing, but I was never asked anymore after that. So, I had ambitions. I worked with a lot of astronauts. I met a lot of astronauts. The building I worked in as a flight controller, they also had the top floor of their offices, and we would do simulations and always be connected with them. So, during simulations for that job, you actually feel like you're flying a mission. You're sitting in the mission control. They're sitting in a simulator in a capsule in the building next door. So you feel very connected to them. But yeah, that never happened for me. But I was closer than I ever imagined that I could ever get for that program. So I'm very grateful.
Laura, I just have to tell you a story. This interview is about you. It's not about me, but I have to tell you my quick astronaut story.
Yes, yes.
So I was working with the company Burroughs Wellcome, which I think you know. It eventually became Glaxo, but we were in RTP. And the fellow that was working with me at the time, we were running a program on Actifed. Actifed is an antihistamine and a decongestant. And so we did an advertising program, and maybe you're too young to remember this, but there was a fellow named Wally Schirra, who was one of the...
Oh, really? Okay.
Right. And Wally was our spokesman. And so I told, this particular fellow when I was down in RTP, and I said to him, my dream was to be an astronaut. And he said, Wally is Wally Schirra. And I said, Wally Schirra, like, one of the original Gemini astronauts. He said, yeah, he's doing our campaign. Would you like to talk to him?
Oh, that's fantastic.
So, as a young kid, it was pretty impressive. He picked up
Yes.
the phone and he had Wally on the line. And then, 2 days later in my mail was an autographed photograph of the original set.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's fantastic.
Sorry to get away from...
No, those are the kind of stories that are, so
Yeah.
fun.
So then you do how many missions?
I worked 42 missions, and is a guidance, navigation, and control officer. There's multiple different roles in that job, but some of them are people you see when, like, if you ever watch the movie Apollo 13, you'll see some people in mission control with the flight director and the Capcom and talking the capsule. But there's also sometimes people, well, there's always people in the rooms behind those people that they're talking to. So depending on your level of experience and so on, you might be in a back room, you might be in the front room. So I worked all those roles, that some during the launch and the landing of the space shuttle, which are, of course, the most exciting, demanding, stressful, and then more that are during the mission. But there's, always wonderful things. I got to see the Hubble Space Telescope launched from the payload bay during a mission I was working. So it's a lot of amazing things that I was able to participate in. And like I said, I'm just really grateful that I was even able to be there and part of the whole team.
Well, thank you for the service that you did for the missions, and I really think that that's just outstanding. So we're going to transition now, Laura, to you all of a sudden realizing that the space program is probably not going to be your future, and all of a sudden you make a conscious decision to retrain yourself. Could you just speak to that and speak to the importance of being flexible? Because I think what we are learning is that, from the work that we're doing with our national center, is that careers are pathways, but at the same time, they're you may set yourself out on one particular idea about your career, but then if you're flexible and you're in the right situation, your career may go in many different directions. Could you just talk to that for us? Because obviously transitioning to the PhD was a big one.
Right, it was a big one. I had been in the program for a long time, Space Shuttle program. I was actually moved into management roles, so I was actually managing teams that were flying in the space, in the control room. But I could see the program was ending, and I really had a passion for science, that kind of the small voice in the back of your head that keeps talking to you and say, hey, I really need you to listen to me. So I, of course, consulted with my husband. It was a team decision between the two of us that I would go back to school, because it required him actually to give up his job when I ultimately took a graduate position at Duke. But I just feel like people too often feel locked in what they do, like they're trained to do something and that's the only opportunity they have. And it doesn't, it's illogical sometimes to say, well, I'm would have put aside all that training and go do something else. You know, I'm the kind of person that I have to be passionate about what I'm doing. I have to feel like it's a contribution and it's important. And I really need to be using my skills. And if I'm in a job that I don't feel like I'm fully demanding my skills and bringing my best out, I can't be satisfied in that job. And so sometimes, I mean, in this case, it seemed like a very illogical decision technically, but I was really following my passion. And I took some time to explore my passion. I actually took some classes at the community college where I was to explore some different areas and say what really sparks my interest. And I got super interested in genetics from that. And that's when I started applying to graduate schools and kind of laying the plan forward. I'll also say during this time, we started our family. So when I started graduate school, I had a 2-month-old baby. And that was hugely demanding. It was a huge transition for, you know, my husband and starting a family and myself and new careers and everything. But to me, that's what you know, life isn't interesting if you just kind of sit on the sidelines and watch what's happening. So that's just me. I go for it. I've heard a lot of people say, you know, I'm not trained in that, so I have to stay where I am. I just don't think that's going to make your life super fulfilling, but to each his own. But for me, it's important to follow my passion, and kind of, yeah. I hope I answered your question. I've kind of gotten it.
Yeah, I think you did. And the other question I was going to have for you is, your PhD was in biogenetics?
Well, it was a university program in genetics and genomics at Duke. So it was a program I found very appealing because you could work in many different labs across Duke, and they do 3 rotations for students before you pick a lab to do your PhD in. So there were a lot of medical labs you could work in, genetics, evolutionary biology. There were many professors who kind of participated in this conglomerate program. And I ended up in the molecular biology lab of Fred Dietrich at Duke, and actually did research with yeast. And that's always kind of turned into my passion, is to understand microbes. Once I graduated from Duke and started in the biotech, I was actually mostly focused on bioinformatics. So I did a lot of computer work. But later in my career, I started getting very interested in microbes and microbes in the soil, and how these invisible creatures that actually are more of these in the whole planet than any other living organism, and we never really see them or think about them, how much they influence, you know, the growth of plants. And we've certainly learned in recent times, even in human health, how incredibly important they are inside our bodies. So I just got very passionate and very interested about that. And so, yeah, I'm always kind of following my interests. as I'm moving forward.
Laura, before we move into the last segment, I wanted to ask you what advice you'd have for young people that are going through our college. You know that, uh, and at this point, you will be exposed to a lot of people at the college, but you've been in our downtown campus where you haven't necessarily seen, because of COVID and because of what's going on, too many students. But you do see PA students from Wake Forest, and you do see nurse anesthetist students in training there. But for our young people who don't necessarily have the means
Right.
to be able to pursue their dream, do you have some advice for those particular folks? Because it's my sense that there are opportunities out there, and for instance, I know the college is doing a tremendous work on trying to make it an even playing field for people to be able to go on in their careers and go on in their studies. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think the community colleges are just a huge asset for our country in general, but especially for students. I've used the community college system, like I said, to explore opportunities of interest that I had. And it's so economical. It's something that's often, in reach for just about anyone. I mentioned that I had started a family while I was in school. And so you can manage these things if you get help. But the community colleges are really especially valuable, I think, because of the personal interaction that you have. When you go to a big university, you can just be one of many, many students. You kind of feel like a drop of water in an ocean. In the community college, I found professors to be very passionate about their students, really interested in trying to help people, and go with, you can ask people questions that aren't necessarily academic. You can say, Professor, I have a family, I have my job, I'm trying to balance all these things. Can you work with me to try to help me get my homework done? Or who can I talk to? Just ask people for help. Tell people, and a community college in particular, I think is very supportive and will help you find a path forward. And again, especially if you don't have a strong idea of what you want to do, to go to this big 4-year college and spend $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year or more doesn't make sense. The community college is the perfect place to explore and grow and kind of tap into your passions. So I just think it's such an underused asset in our society, and I'd like to see more people kind of elevate their opinion of community colleges because of the very important role that they play in helping people advance themselves.
So Laura, we have phased from being a chemical engineer, a mission specialist, now a doctorate, and you all of a sudden join a biotech company. Can you just give us a summary of that?
Oh, the work in the biotech.
When you were doing your work with a major biotech firm.
Right. So I really loved that role. When I started graduate school, we were still doing very low level sequencing. Things took a lot of time to process. And then we've seen in the last, the 10 years, last 10 or 15 years, the skyrocketing capabilities we have in technology that allow sequencing, which really requires a lot of skills in processing all that tsunami of data. So I loved learning a lot about bioinformatics, and was always my biotech job. We did a lot of, we sequenced plant genomes. We looked at gene expression and how we could understand what was happening inside the plant. There were always just so many interesting questions. And we also serviced, when you work on computers in bioinformatics, you can answer questions for anyone in the world. So, we work with people in Europe and China and India. And so there was always an interesting question. The technology that's emerging has allowed us to really answer those questions. And so I got very into bioinformatics and analysis and those kind of things. And then, as I said, more recently, this emerging field of microbes and our ability to do the sequencing and actually longer sequencing abilities to put genomes together that we never could before, opened up a whole new world of questions and a whole new understanding of what kind of microbes were there. And I'll also say when I was there, I did get into management and managing people. Typically in any kind of role, you will be working a lot with people, managing people. It's a very different skill set. It's much more challenging than you think it will be. You really have to care about your people, help guide them and understand them, really listen to them. I think everyone goes into management thinking, oh, I just intuitively have a good gut understanding of how to do this, and that's usually not going to work either. So being able to work with and manage people will always be an important skill, no matter what field students choose to go into. So get, as much learning and training around that as you can as well, not just technical skills. People skills, collaboration will always be very essential. So focus on those and take time to understand them. So I was into management and also a lot of technical work and bioinformatics. And then, so answering questions for product development in a lot of different species of plants and microbes and so on across the company was sort of my biotech experience.
Excellent. Now, fast Laura, you're starting a new company, you're becoming an entrepreneur, and you end up coming to us at the Innovation Quarter for the Analytical and Molecular Skills Development Lab, which we have, which is part of the National Center. So how did that happen?
Well, I have thought a lot about what I wanted to be the next phase of my career. And I'm very excited about some opportunities. And I've kind of had that small voice in the back of my mind for some time saying, it would be really great to try to start your own business. And so this opportunity seemed perfect. But to do that, I needed a laboratory to work in. And I started calling all kinds of places all across the state. There's lists of different places where you can rent laboratory space. And so I just started calling all kinds of places. And it was scary. It was intimidating because I felt like such a small, entrepreneur trying to do stuff. And I'm talking to all these big companies. But after talking to a whole bunch of places, I finally got in touch with you, Russ, through Innovation Quarter, and you had lab space. And for all the reasons actually previously that I talked about why I think the community college is such a powerful asset for students to get started are the exact same reasons, I feel like as an entrepreneur, the community college system is really fantastic. I've come into the Innovation Quarter and I found so much support. I'm not just another number of all these people. I'm like really important, and I've had tons of support from the university and trying to do everything they can. Jason Gagliano in the lab manager has been fantastic in helping me get started, and lots of support. Kara Libby, who's also in the lab, has been very helpful. Russ, you've pointed me to opportunities and different people. And I've also been very impressed with the collaboration across community colleges. We've been communicating with Marie Knight and AB Tech, and she's been sharing resources with us. And so all of these amazing assets are available at the community college. And I'm a single entrepreneur at this point in time, so I may, sorry about the noise. I don't know if that's disruptive. Okay. All of those reasons make the community college a perfect place for me to get started.
Excellent. Laura, I don't think you could have said it any better. And I truly believe that your presence in our lab is invigorating for us too. It's very motivating. So I want to thank you for having chose us. Laura, at some point in time, when things settle down from the COVID point of view, we're probably going to be bringing back in interns and federal work study students. If you were in a situation to have one of these students assisting you, what would be the skill set that you would be looking at in order to have somebody come in and to be able to assist you?
Well, first of all, I think that would be a wonderful thing to have. I would really encourage any student to get as much on-the-job training, different experiences as they can, like that, just to see what kind of things they like. Specifically, what I would be looking for is kind of some basic understandings of biology. Of course, I do genetics and DNA sequencing and that kind of thing. So some knowledge about that, basic understanding of that. Some ability to work in the lab. So a lot of these skills can be picked up on the job, but a willingness to try new things. In the laboratory, we need to pipette and move things to different types of equipment. And mostly, I would need somebody who's just willing to jump in and give it their best shot at whatever's happening. They need to just be open to learning. The last thing I would want is someone to come in and go, well, I have not been trained on that, so I can't do that. That's not it. Even if you haven't been trained on that, say, I don't know this yet, but I'm open to learning it and doing your home study or whatever you need to do to get up. But mostly I'm looking for people with enthusiasm and openness and a willingness to learn, because that's pretty much what you have to have in anything you do. And then some, basic biology understanding and people skills, able to work in teams, communicate well. Those would be the things I'm looking for.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura. Laura, I think we're at the end of this terrific conversation we've had today. And I want to thank you on behalf of the SciTech team. And Sean, I don't know if you have any questions for Laura.
I am all set. I appreciate you for coming on the show, Laura.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I feel honored, and I'm very, very grateful that I did discover Foresight Tech, and I am looking forward to great things together.
Well, thanks, Laura. And we're going to end the recording, but certainly the partnership continues.
Great.